And then what is going on, Belly Up Sports family? It's another Wednesday night. That means it's another time for the midweek mid-range. We took a week off last week. It's off season. There's less to talk about, but now we're going to wrap the last 2 weeks. I got Chris Dunn here with Belly Up Sports to talk with us. Chris, how are we doing?
Yo, Parker, how are you?
I'm all right. So people that follow the show know that I'm a teacher by day, basketball person by night. And we just started school and we have football and two-a-days and so on. It's been a long week or so, 10 days, really probably more like, and we're in the full swing of things, but we're here to talk hoops because there's a full hoop slate going on right now, right? This turned into a 24-hour league. Random question, peek behind the scenes here. This was not a prepped question. Chris, when did you feel like the league went to 24/7, 365 kind of league?
Oh, man. I think over the last couple of years, there maybe not been one moment, but when you say that question, like the things that like really pop out to me are like, the Kyrie trade in August, which I've been thinking a lot about lately with like the Ben Simmons situation. I think Twitter took it to a new level. And I always think about like the DeAndre Jordan hostage situation where I hope if Affleck does an Argo sequel, it's around that. But it's there's just so much awesome NBA content. And I always love talking hoops. And today I was like, oh man, what can we talk about? There's nothing. And then 9 things happen. So it's it's awesome. Question, just because we didn't talk about this before the show and kind of keep things a little loose here in the happy hour on the LA. We haven't talked since Summer League. How are you feeling about Jalen?
As long as his hamstring thing's not chronic or nagging or a sign of honestly, he looks great. He looks like the kind of star. I'm almost done with the Rockets roundup for the last 2 weeks or so. They're coming out more sporadically in the offseason. But I think the interesting thing is he's done little things to endear himself to the fan base. He got a grill, right? And that's super gaudy and ostentatious. Why get a grill on your face? But he got the diamonds in his teeth. They're they come in and out, right? And that's iconically Houston hip hop. If you're a hip hop person, if you think Mike Jones, Paul Wall, Slim Thug, the early 2000s, and he was I'm in Houston now. This is what we're doing. That was just there was, and that doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but the city of Houston loved it, right? I'm living awesome in Dallas currently, but the city of Houston loved it. And he had he took shots at Detroit about I wanted to go there because it was the number 1 pick and they had the number 1 pick. But Houston's a much better place to live.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite. He endeared me in such a big way when he said that. That's the perfect he the chip on the shoulder, but just being honest. Detroit, not as good as a no income state that also has an awesome party scene for NBA players. So that's gonna be a fun team this year. Hopefully they do a lot of pick and rolls with him and Christian, and it seems like they could do a lot of. They could definitely be an exciting league pass team with those two. For me, just to come around and fandom for Summer League, Knicks felt really good about their picks. McBride, Deuce, he seems like a Patrick Beverly pitbull, and Deuce, Grimes, who you have a little experience with in Houston, hopefully, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, and obviously, this is a little crazy fan to say, but with coming out being when he was at Kansas, being a number 8 recruit out of high school, who knows in the Tibbs system with Kenny Payne from Kentucky there on the coaching staff and the Utah guys, maybe he can turn into Jimmy Butler light down the road. If the Knicks are going to go star hunting, they can't trade everyone, and it'll be nice to hopefully have a couple people who can develop in the system and take leaps.
Yeah, and I like Grimes a lot. I think Grimes is very much a Tibbs guy. I think there's also just some maturing you do between 18 and 21, 22 years old, right? Like if we were all watching every mistake you or I made at 18 on national television, we probably would have a much different life too, right? Like
hey, like try 28. Like it's like I'm just very happy to be employed.
I like the Quentin Grimes kid.
Yeah,
the Knicks are going to be fun and young again. You know, the East is not the East of the early aughts. Like it's a tough conference, and I don't know if they actually get any farther or not. I'd like to hear your take on that, frankly. But I do think like they could be better next year, and they were good last year.
Yeah, I think a bunch of teams in the East are going to be better this year. Like I think the Bucks will play with like a little bit more relaxed now. The Hawks are going to take a big jump. Like they'll have this team has been together for a year now, and like it'll be the first full season or McMillan, which will be great. Like Brooklyn, for me, had the best off season, and we'll see if those guys are healthy. And like, I think realistically, like Knicks, you're hoping best is like a fifth seed, like so step down. There's a good chance that they're going to be like a play-in team. But like at the end of the day, it's like, what are you trying to do here? And like they are going start hunting. That's what they're doing. Most of the contracts are really good. Kemba's going to be fun for when he plays, and hopefully he gets 60+ games out of him and Rose each. But like I think the goal is like develop these young players, be competitive, and continue to accumulate assets. I think the smartest move they made this offseason was at the draft, the trade down at 19, pushing that pick and getting one from Charlotte into the future and just keeping that asset for whatever star becomes available. I mean, that's what you're doing, and that's like the course they've chosen, so you kind of have to be all in on it. So hopefully the young guys keep playing. Hopefully, you know, they don't give up all of them in a trade with all their picks, but we'll see what happens.
Well, it's frankly the similarity in the situation in Houston, New York, and then we can move on to the rest of the show. But the similarity between Houston and New York is that once you choose a path or choose a plan, stick to it. Houston, when the Harden thing blew up, they had to do whatever. They said, we're getting a bunch of guys that are young. Like Christian Wood is 27, and like the goal is to have him be the old guy. Like I know we have John Wall, and I know we have Eric Gordon, and I know we have Daniel House is like a year older than Wood, right? But the goal is to have a team of guys younger than Wood with a bunch of guys with high potential and see what happens, right? And it's just like we're going to stick to it. We're going to get all the draft picks, accumulate all the capital, and we're just going to keep on rolling the dice to these young guys. The Knicks, like you're saying, they get all their chips, and eventually we're going to pull a guy that wants the big city into New York, right? We're going to get him to New York, not Brooklyn, or into New York, not LA. Like one of these guys, there's only so many roster spots on those big market teams, right? We're going to get one to New York. And it's like you said, you got to stick to once you go down the path, you got to stick to it.
Yeah. It's hopefully they do, and like hopefully it's just like improvement. Like you can be a better team with a worse record. So I think that like just be a better team no matter what the wins and losses are this year.
Definitely. I would be remiss to not point out, normally we point out like the score of the game that's going on right now, but the impressive WNBA score of the night is actually not the current game going on, but that the Phoenix Mercury beat the New York Liberty 106-79. The more impressive thing about the Phoenix Mercury is that they had 3 players with over 20 points. Griner, Diggins, and Taurasi each broke 20. If that 3-headed monster is on top of their game, that's a scary beast with Taurasi coming back in the lineup post-Olympics. She wasn't healthy, I guess, before the Olympics. So if she's back to being herself, that's wild. The topic of the night, though, we're going to do an open container question because the show is sponsored by Yeti. And while this Yeti has a top, I guess, once you pop the top off your Yeti, anything goes in or out of your Yeti. And I got to ask, what is your take on this Rachel Nichols situation as it's unfolding today? Rachel Nichols, it sounds like, is released by ESPN. Looks like The Jump, which was not just her show, but was mostly her show, is also canceled. So, like, what was your initial reaction when you heard that, Chris?
Well, a bunch of things. And I think, like, you know, one of the reasons I think there are a lot of reasons why this is an important story. I think, like, one thing I kind of brought up before the pod, like, when we're just briefly talking about it, it's like, you know, NBA reporters go into the Hall of Fame. And the reason is like, there are a few sports where the people that you see that present the product are in your homes and matter to the sports in a big way. And like today, like the NBA lost one of the faces of the NBA, so it's like a huge story for that reason. I think the blame starts with ESPN for not nipping this in the bud from the jump. No pun intended. Yeah, thank you. It was like, just trying to get like a layup in there. It's like it felt like this was moving on for Rachel was the right move. I think what disappoints me is like, I thought Malik Andrews was doing an excellent job, as like pretty much like everything she does is excellent. Feels like she's a future, if she wants to be Good Morning America host, and to make that transition in the Disney's family. But like it felt like she would have brought a lot to hosting the jump and keeping that going. And I was surprised they didn't make that move. I think with Rachel, like the thing that's always kind of stood out for me, like, women in sports, women in broadcasting entertainment have a tougher road to hoe. Like, I think like her with the comments about Maria, the thing that just like I've had trouble getting in my head is like, just like you've married into Mike Nichols and Diane Sawyer's family. Like Maria Taylor had like a little tougher than you. Like, she wasn't like Maria Taylor, like, her mother didn't interview Nixon, or like her father didn't like direct The Graduate. Like, it's like, you may not have like been on third base, Rachel, but like you're definitely not born on second. And so like, I don't really have any sympathy for Rachel. And I think like, a lot of my African-American friends, like the thing that I think kind of resonates, and I think it probably resonates through the league, is like, there are a lot of African-Americans, like no matter how much progress you make in America, you're afraid that these conversations are still going behind the scenes. And like, she never should have been like recorded, and like it should, like, obviously that's like fucked up or messed up, but sorry.
No, this is that flies in this show. My other show is an education show. This one's fine.
Okay, good. Sorry, like I've been doing so many podcasts where some you can curse, some you can't. But it's like, but yeah, like it's like you shouldn't be recorded. But like at the end of the day, like I think like she's definitely lost a major section of the fan base, and like the NBA has lost a face now who is really close to Adam Silver, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a moratorium in the sense that I don't think she never works again, right?
No,
I don't know what entity. Does Bill Simmons like sticking it to ESPN? Does he scoop her up, right? Or like does something happen to that effect? If the Ringer got into broadcasting games, that'd be the face I bet Bill Simmons puts on the front. I think the interesting thing is that like if you went through it's just like you said, like the fear for so many people is that conversations like what was recorded in Rachel Nichols' hotel room, so many conversations like that people are scared of happening behind closed doors. This is very literally taping that conversation happening behind closed doors, and that's frightening for a lot of people, right? That like they climb these ladders, they work so hard, and then there are people talking like this. The interesting thing in the thing said behind closed doors, and we can get into the recording aspect in a second, is that like there's like a 10-word or maybe 2 lines that are awful, right? I actually kind of understand the rest of the talk, like being upset that like I thought I had this show. It sounds like it might have been under her contract. Like the other parts, like I thought I worked hard to get this and it got taken away from me. I kind of get it's the 2 sentences that are irredeemable that just sink the whole thing, right? Like it's just like, oh well, you had me. Oh, you lost me, right? Like boom. And that's unfortunately the way that it went for Rachel Nichols, right? Is that like people couldn't get past it. You can't get past those 2 sentences, right? And so that's the way it went. We can talk about pricing, talk about whatever. I am more interested in what this means for, only because the Rachel Nichols dialogue is like everywhere. What is ESPN going to do for basketball now? Like they've canceled, as much as you talk about like Rachel Nichols as like a big part of the NBA, ESPN's The Jump was a daily show that had moved up to an hour in this primetime spot midday The jump set was the set going to the finals, right? Like that was what ESPN was shipping out as their NBA product. And now it's gone. Like, hey, ESPN, call midweek, mid-range. You can hit my DMs. We'll be there. We'll go to the finals. We'll go whatever. But more importantly, like that's a big part of like the stratosphere of making. We talked this open the pod. The league is a 24/7, 365 entity because of things like the jump, and ESPN's cutting that back. Like, are we going to get Mike Greenberg talking more about the Jets now? Like what are we going to get in that slot?
I wonder if the Kellerman thing is like if that, because Kellerman is moving off of First Take. I wonder if that's taking that spot. But like, geez, if I have to watch Max Kellerman again, like, then why don't that guy go away for 2 decades? Like it's like a very interesting thing, and it's just like I think the good thing was like it helped, like also too, like and we're going to talk about 2K ratings in a little bit, like all the NBA players would watch the jump, like it kind of became a place to like hear what the daily discourse was, and like to hear where people were, and like like when you would see like LeBron send a tweet about like thinking the Lakers was old, probably because he watched the jump. Like, so there's a lot of that. So, you're definitely losing something that became part of the fabric of the NBA today. It just felt like there were ways to kind of keep it going. And, I think like it gave reps, like obviously like, if you're listening to a podcast in basketball, you're probably a Zach Lowe fan. Like I think it gave Zach Lowe great reps. I think it gave a lot of like, for television, I think it gave a lot of NBA players like very good reps as they, transition to their for next career. So yeah, it's like a bummer. I thought like, Cassie Hubbard would have been a great host. Malika obviously we talked about would be a fantastic host. It felt like there were a lot of options, and they have a lot of people. Charlie Caruso, formerly of WWE, she would like now as like the backup First Take host, she would have been a stellar replacement for Rachel Nichols. So I think a lot of options, and it's a bummer for the NBA a little bit that show no longer exists.
Well, and it was just this great aggregator, right? Like obviously, yes, you're talking about we got great personality out of it. Like, who is Kendrick Perkins if we don't have the jump?
Yeah,
right. Like who is like Richard Jefferson is now a game play-by-play guy, but he got so many, if you're talking about reps, he got so much of his airtime on the jump. I also think it's weird to think about, like, weirdly, this also hurts the problem that ESPN had that Rachel Nichols was involved in and got in trouble, right? Like, you talk about reps, that was reps for Malika Andrews, right? That was reps for Kendrick. That was reps for all of these people to get on TV daily, shoot the breeze about basketball, whether it's Twitter, Reddit, 2K, old dunk clips, whatever is happening in basketball that day. And now it's gone. I hope it's not. I hope it gets replaced by, like, I hope someone made a marketing decision of like, we can still have a basketball show, but we have to rebrand it. The jump is too closely tied to Rachel. That news has not come out yet. It's just been pitched that, or been pushed that the jump is canceled. Rachel Nichols is not coming back to ESPN, etc. I just can't imagine that, like, if the issue is inequities in hiring and who gets put on TV when at ESPN, and that people are talking about it in that way, getting rid of a show that outside of Rachel actually promoted a lot of other voices is a weird way to go about it to me. I don't know that that's intuitively what I would have done, unless you just in some market research decided you can't separate Rachel from the jump. And they certainly replaced her with Malika on the sidelines at the finals games. Like, they thought that worked. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah. Also, and like, it was actually like a solid show for like what a studio show for what it is. Like, First Take, like, if you're into Stephen A. Smith, you're into him, like, it's theater, and like you're either in or you're out. Get Up is like the worst thing on television, at least for me. Like, of like the most boring stuff, where like the only thing interesting on is like when Jalen or Kendrick's on, but it's like like a lot of uneducated takes where it's just like, we have to talk about this, let's throw something out. At least on the jump, like all the takes were educated.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting too that like it kind of had, because it was all basketball all the time, it attracted, like you're talking about, basketball people. So you did get the former players, whether that's Jalen or whomever, coming on and talking about like, well, there's an X's and O's thing here you're missing. Or they got, frankly, Woj was not an infrequent guest. Or they got Windhorst. Or they got they got
Woj
guys
also,
that
Woj benefited in his way. Like when he came to ESPN, he was horrible on TV. At least he's like serviceable now, and a lot of that is like having that platform daily helps so much.
Yeah, and I know I'm just talking about how like the show promoted people of color. Now I'm naming like a bunch of white dudes, but what I really guess like he's talking about is that like it like had people that did this did basketball professionally, as opposed to like Stephen A. talks all sports. Around the Horn, I love Around the Horn, but each of those people is like an all sports person, right? PTI, I think Tony and Mike are very smart people, but they're all sports people, right? Like this was basketball centric people. Like there was no, like you're not pulling on Keyshawn Johnson, right? Like Keyshawn's a fun guy to have on TV, but he's not going to do the jump, right? And so I don't know what replaces the jump in the ESPN lineup in the same way. It's going to be a show. You said Kellerman, like the time slot's too prime time to not be a TV show, right?
Yeah. I think they have a lot of people in-house who are, can carry that format. It's also too like, Disney's cut salaries over last year. Like, do you just want to kind of put the people that you're already paying in those spots so you don't have to pay more people? So we'll see. It'll be interesting, but yeah, I think it was the right move to let Rachel go and move on. And I think it was the wrong move to kill the jump. But hopefully something good replaces it.
Yeah, and I think that. So yes, I think that it's like something good needs to replace it. You said like they're going with some of the people they have. I also think they really went younger too. Like I like Mike Golick Jr.'s presence, but Mike Golick Jr. I'm assuming is much cheaper than Mike Golick Sr., and that was a clear bet they made, right? Like literally in the same family. When Golick Sr.'s done this forever, he's more expensive. Like you don't stay on to get paid less money. Get Golick Jr. in, you can pay him a little bit less. He doesn't have a wife and kids to take care of, whatever, right? Now, that all said, that's not the only story of the day, and I'd like to see what unfolds, because I think what replaces the jump in Rachel could also be a later topic when that happens. Whether that's they put highly questionable on, which is fun, but it's not the same, right? Or if we get another hour of Stephen A. Smith, because that dude doesn't sleep, and that would also be viable.
He's
do you have any last words on Rachel?
No, it's one thing that's just interesting is like it feels like anytime ESPN brings big people back, excluding Stephen A., it doesn't work out. And I think it's just like you have a lot. I think like the NBA roster has never been more stacked, as we kind of talked about, like from names like Cassie to Malika, and like just start kind of going with those people and build them out.
Definitely. If that's where we're gonna leave that until more news comes. Again, this is recording at 9:45 East Coast time. This came out this afternoon. Like this is new information. Like there will be more, I'm sure. Frankly, if you're listening to this later in the week, there will probably be more by the time you've heard this as far as what replaces the show. But we're going to jump into our, it's a tried and true segment here at the Midweek Midrange, because the show was sponsored by Yeti. And so we're going to do a little hot tea, cold brew. Hot tea, cold brew is brought to you by Yeti coolers, cups, and koozies. Yeti is the go-to shop for keeping things hot or cold, just like NBA stories. Yeti is based out of Austin, Texas. Check out the links in our social media handles for all your insulated needs for tailgating, camping, and daily life. Yeti is built for the wild. And yes, to the person that asked the other day, and it was a comment on Twitter? Anyway, yes, I do somewhat sneak that, just like these NBA stories, straight into Yeti based out of Austin, Texas, because I am trying to speak that into existence. One of these days, Texas gets a 4th team. All right, but
I'm trying to speak into existence. I get like some free Yeti merch.
Yeah. Also, we would love. Yeah. I mean, they already have Austin FC, right? All right.
Yeti.
Hot tea, cold brew, Chris. NBA players should not care about NBA 2K rankings.
Cold brew, because like 2K is such a big part and fabric of like video games and sports right now. Like your brand, like every NBA player is a brand, and like especially more so now than ever. Like when the 2K ratings come out, every 2K fan looks at it, especially like little kids, and it kind of like it plays into the overall brand and like your shoe deals and things like that. And like also like these are the most competitive people in the world. To make it to the NBA, you have to like really be incredibly competitive. And like, if I am like Dame Lillard and like I'm below like Giannis, I'd be pissed. Like Giannis, 2-time MVP, he's got a ring now, has a book, as you know from your podcast earlier in the week. But like, like I would still like, if I have done everything in my life to make it to the NBA, I would be like, yeah, like who are these like nerd gamers putting these like programming this game to put like me a point below this person? They've never hit game winning 3.
And then I completely agree that part of what the competitive drive we like seeing in NBA players is also why they react to these ratings. And I don't think it's fair to separate the two. It's not like saying, hey, be competitive about your job in this era or this realm, but not in that realm. Like, no, it's my job, it's my life. I'm competitive about it. The other thing I think is hard for like, so here's the deal with NBA players, and here's the secret sauce for a lot of people. I think is that these are typically a bunch of dudes in their 20s with a really, really cool job. And what's happening with an NBA 2K rating is a bunch of, I mean, if an NBA player like Kevin Durant, I'm talking about a bunch of dorks are sitting around watching games, playing video games, and saying, I think you're like a 68% free. I think you're like a 68% shooter. Or I think you're like really like a 72 on your handle. And they're like, I do this all day long, all the time. Who are you to tell me I'm anything less than a 99? Like the truth is, for anyone sitting at home playing 2K, you cannot tell an NBA player that anything less than a 99 on all of it, right? I think that there's some aspect of that that's like, this is people that don't play NBA basketball literally rating people that do play NBA basketball. And there's something about that that's weird and off-putting, and I get why they're upset by that when they don't respect the rating. I also think it's interesting that, like, this is a more grandiose take than just NBA. So in like football, if I say, Chris, who's like the greatest football player of all time?
Tom Brady.
Right. If I say like, I don't know, baseball, I guess you might go Babe Ruth. But outside of Babe Ruth, who would you say is the best baseball player of all time? You'd probably go someone fairly recent.
Yeah, probably
right.
Like, yeah. I wish I had somebody off the top of my head. For me, it's Griffey. But
well, and then I think a lot of like kids would say Trout, right? Or maybe Shohei Ohtani blows it out of the water in a second, right? Yeah. I think it's fascinating that we're so quick to say the best player in football is a present tense guy. And like there's this hesitation to do, like, of course the best player is present. People evolve and get bigger, stronger, faster every generation. Like that there's a 99 on teams from the 60s, 70s, and 80s because NBA 2K has like old throwback modes. And there's no one over a 96 on the current game. Only like perpetuates this idea that you'll never be as good as them. When the truth is that like basketball is the only sport it feels like we, with the exception of like Babe Ruth, it's the only sport we do that in. And even Babe Ruth, we like put the little like note like didn't play against black people, right? Like like there's something to all of that that's interesting and weird, and that's probably bigger than just NBA 2K rating. But it is also part of this, right? Like Jordan's a 99 and LeBron's a 96. Conversation's over, right? Like he's better. Like that's the way that goes, and that's weird to me.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of like, this is like a weird off-topic thing that you made me think of when we're talking about like evolving players. My girlfriend and I have been watching A Different World on HBO Max. And there's an episode where Ron and Dwayne Wade are like passing a commercial against Rick Barry and another player I don't know off the top of my head. And they look so out of shape. And like it's after they've retired. But I'm just like, if you're looking at like Dwayne Wade right now, like he looks in amazing shape. Like it's just like it's such a tougher league now. And like obviously like we're talking video games and stuff, it's just like from both like an evolution standpoint, but also from like the evolution of working out and the evolution of like sports science and health of like what you eat and like, you know, Chris Paul becoming plant-based, like all that stuff.
Well, and like bluntly is could you have been like if you put LeBron James in a pair of Chuck Taylors, he's like he's not going to play the same. Like it's his feet are going to hurt. I don't know. I think that
they hurt like walking now. Like
yeah, yeah. I think that argument is always silly, and it's weird that 2K kind of perpetuates it. So I get players being pissed. I think it's funny when they get pissed about the graphics. And do you see the clip of Evan Fournier got pissed because he took a picture of himself on the Knicks, and he has like, I don't know how to call it anything besides the soccer haircut where it's like buzz on the sides and then like straight, you know.
It's awesome. Like the tweet he sent was fantastic.
He was so funny to see Evan Fournier get pissed about his appearance on NBA 2K because it was just so not him. Which is also probably the fact that those are not accurate.
They gave him more hair. Like I don't know why he's upset.
They gave him more hair, which is it's like also definitely not how his hair grows hair, but it's definitely more hair, which is.
I hope like as a Knicks fan, he makes like kind of a call of like, it might be time to like just go bald. A lot of great players in the Garden with a shaved head.
Yeah, there are. If you get Olympic Evan Fournier, though, I don't know if he'll care what his haircut is. Moving into the next thing. This is, I guess, Boston and New York, somewhat a rivalry, but jumping to a rival of your New York Knicks. Marcus Smart signed an extension. So the hot tea cold brew topic is the Marcus Smart extension helps the Celtics. What do you think?
I think it definitely does. And like, you know, it seems like from what you read and you hear about that team last year, like you need to get rid of Tristan Thompson. Not a cool dude. Two, like Marcus, like you see the way he plays and like if he is on your team, he is a player that's like really easy to love because of how much he puts his heart and soul into it. It's like kind of hard to put your heart and soul into it if you're in all these trade rumors. And he still might get traded, but at least like they paid him and like, so that's great. I think the thing that's like more interesting is like the biggest transition this summer feels like there have been years where everyone will like for 2 to 3 years out hoard their cap space, and no one's really hoarding their cap space anymore. And I think part of that is like, you know, asset accumulation, like we're talking about with the Knicks. I think too, it's just like the inside intel of like who's leaving and who do people think are leaving. And it seems like free agency the next couple of years, based on like the way teams are like signing contracts now, may not have as much big star movement. Like the Evan Fourniers will still change teams, but it feels like, you know, that face of the franchise is going to move more so in trades now than in free agency.
Well, and I think it's also so this just happened in Houston, right? We just lost 2 former MVPs, not at free agency, right? I think with players gaining agency, there's also something to sign the big contract, and if you don't like what's happening, throw a fit, right? That's worked. It worked for Davis, it worked for Harden, it worked for Westbrook. Like, throw a fit, see what happens. I mean, as bluntly as possible, when James Harden sits down in a press conference after he lost the Lakers and he's like, I don't know what else I can do here, and leaves, it's like, you have to trade him. Like balls in their court when they get that kind of power, right? So I get signing the big contracts, frankly. Sign the big one. Like, you don't know when that Achilles pops. Sign the big one, Marcus. Like, you play hard. Your body has gone through a lot. I not just because of that. I think this signing is interesting because it clearly indicates the ball is in his court. Like, he is a culture setter for them with a young team, right? Because they got rid of Kemba. They got Tatum and Brown and need some like infrastructure. Or I guess those guys have been in the league several years now, but Marcus Smart sets the culture, and that kind of gives him more value in Boston than he gets in New York, than he gets in LA, than he gets in the Bay Area, than he gets in wherever else he could have ended up. Because that's like, if they don't have him, who do they get to replace him? Like, the culture in LA is this is Bron's team. The culture in the Bay Area is this is Steph, right? New York, it's Tibbs. I guess you could argue it's a player, but Tibbs sets the culture.
It's probably Tibbs, yeah.
Yeah. In Boston, while Tatum is great and Jaylen Brown is a phenomenal basketball player, they aren't culture setters in the same way. Tatum is a bucket. He'll always get a bucket. Jaylen Brown is a freak athlete, can go block any shot, can go steal any loose ball, whatever. But they play hard when Marcus Smart is playing well. And that's just something you can't, like, that gives him value there that he doesn't get elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Jaylen's going to have that. Like, he definitely seems like a leader in that city. And I think that's going to translate to the franchise at some point. I don't know if he's there yet. I do think the Celtics team, like, compared to a couple, I think when you look at the Celtics, you kind of have to look at like the full big picture, right? Like, they hoarded all these assets, and they really didn't get what you kind of anticipated out of it. Like, Kyrie didn't say they weren't able to trade for Anthony Davis. They passed on some people, and like, some of those people like that they passed on, like Kawhi wasn't going to stay. So like, you can't really blame them for that. It doesn't feel like they maximized their window, but I think they're a better team this year than they were last year. I think having a new coach and a new voice is going to help. I think Nesmith really turned it on in the second half of last year, and it feels like he can be a really good role player this year. Dennis Schroeder, like, I don't know how he's feeling right now, but whether he starts or is coming off the bench, that is a good addition. I also think like Horford, like, Al Horford, like signing that contract and like the fit of being like one of like 9 bigs in Philly wasn't great. He actually played like really well for the Thunder last year. One of the reasons they had to like tell him not to play because they're tanking. But
teams always try to win. Chris, what are you talking about?
Yeah, 100%. OKC forever. But like I think like one really good thing is like it felt like the Celtics last year was Tatum's possession, Brown's possession, back forth. I think hopefully Marcus is healthy this year. I also think too with Horford, even though he's overpaid, and the contract is becoming an asset right now in a little bit of a way because you can get out of it early. But I think the main thing is, I always believe when you have an NBA team with a center who can pass and facilitate, it really opens up your offense. There are varying degrees of that. Like, obviously, like the MVP right now, like he does that in an insane way that like is very hard to strive for. But like, like going back to Tibbs, like those teams with Noah was a facilitator, and having that person at the top of the elbow that you can just get the ball to, who can then get a shot for one of their 3, I think is really going to open up things again.
Even more recently, I would agree and say that like part of the secret sauce in Milwaukee is that there's a lot of possessions Giannis to the center. Even with Brook Lopez on the floor, they spotted him up in the corner like he's a 2 guard and let Giannis play center, and he facilitates from the top of the key, elbow or drives, right?
Miami, that's one of the good things about Bam.
Bam, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would agree there. Just to segue into another big man, what do you think about hot tea cold brew about the Joel Embiid extension? I don't think I've been on the show to talk about that yet. What do you think about what's going on there?
I mean, I think you have to do it if you're the Sixers. Like, obviously, you sign the contract and you say a prayer and light some candles and like, maybe like go like the Secret Santa with Doctor Strange to like wish that those knees hold up. I mean, like, listen, the Sixers are kind of a work in progress at the moment. Like, I know bunch of people feel that they really haven't done much this offseason, and everyone's kind of getting impatient with Simmons. Like, Morey don't care. Like, and I think that's like a common like flaw in like evaluating like teams. Like, you're never until like the trade deadline happens and until the buyout market happens, like you're not done improving your team. So we'll see what happens with Simmons, like whether, it's traded for a big star, which might be tough, whether it's a 3 or 4 or 5 team trade with a Minnesota type team. But it kind of feels like have to do the Embiid. That team, like, going to check in on it once the Simmons issue is figured out.
Well, and I think so. Morey obviously was in Houston for a decade and a half. My take on Morey has been he sees the numbers in a way none of us understand, and the numbers always, like, he's right on the numbers. Basketball is just more than that. It's not that the numbers aren't also basketball. It's that, like, he sees he can move Ben Simmons anytime between now and the trade deadline, or really between now and January, and get X amount of games out of whatever comes back for Ben Simmons, and, like, that's fine. When the truth is, it's like there's going to take some gelling, some meshing, some personality, there's more to it than just, like, plug in numbers and stats and spacing and spots on the floor. And I don't mean to say that anyone else can grasp the numbers the way he does, but it's like if you have all, when you cut off one sense, you get the others. If you cut off this idea that, like, I don't care about the people side of it, he's, like, all of a sudden better at the numbers side of it. I hope this does mean, though, for them that, like, they're choosing a path here, because I think I am not a guy that thinks Ben Simmons can't be a good pro. I think this does indicate to me that that's the direction they're going, because I'm to the point where I don't see a real possible fit here. Morey is a stars guy. He wants stars, and we'll figure the fit out later.
I think after the way, like, both Embiid and Doc, like, showing what a bad GM Doc it was at the time, killing Simmons' trade value, like, they essentially left a white outline around Simmons' body in Philadelphia with those post-game comments. So it'll be interesting. Like, Morey thinks about things in ways that, like, to your point, like, nobody saw the Chris Paul deal coming. He thinks outside the box. We'll see if he can have a good team chemistry.
Yeah, I don't. I think that we'll know more about the Embiid contract once we know what the Simmons situation is. Again, it's worth mentioning on the show, Ben Simmons is still in the Sixers. There is no trade in place, as we know. There are the same rumors there were a month ago, and there'll be the same rumors in probably a month until something happens. Last hot tea cold brew question. Hot tea cold brew. I learned something from the Kevin Durant and Draymond Green conversation. They had Draymond Green, I guess, technically hosted an interview for Bleacher Report last week. Did you learn anything? It was
really amazing theater. And it felt like those guys, like, both deserved Tony Awards this year. It was such an amazing watch. Like, everyone kind of, like, knows the story of what happened there. And I think, like, this narrative about blaming, like, Steve Kerr and Bob Myers, it felt like they're being thrown under the bus so both Draymond and KD can come off as good guys. And, like, it kind of goes back to, like, a lot of the NBA now, like, when you're, Twitter 24/7 shows, like, the Jump RIP, like, the conversation is always going on, so you hear what everyone is saying. And, we all know how insecure KD is, like, as good a basketball player as he is, like, from his burner accounts and things like that. But it just kind of felt like this is the narrative they're choosing. It was very odd to see Draymond do that to, like, because it feels like that team still is going for a championship. So, like, you're throwing your coach under the bus going into the season. So I don't know if I learned anything. I just thought it was all incredibly interesting theater.
Theater's a good word. I think it was interesting because of the timing of it too, in that it came after the two just played together in Tokyo, right? Obviously, the moment that they talk about and goes viral is there's a Clipper game in Durant's. Was it the last year, or it was the end of the year before? The last year in Golden State. where Durant comes down, jacks up a three with like 32 seconds left that would have won the game, but it was way too early in whatever clock he thought was going on. Clippers come down, they miss a shot, and then in response, Draymond dribbles the ball down, loses it as the clock expires. Durant never gets a touch. It looks bad. I think anyone watching Draymond Green play any level of basketball knows he was trying to pass the ball there to somebody, but he lost it, right? So with that said, I think that it's then they go on their fight. They have a fight after the game. Kevin Durant wants the ball. Draymond Green's like, shut the bleep up, right? Whatever. Then they go into the next overtime and so on, and they end up getting the championship that year, but Durant gets hurt, and then he leaves, and da-da-da, right? Everyone cited that as the reason that the team broke up. That's not necessarily the case of listening to Durant. What Durant, I think, is interesting is that they both cite, like, organizational problems. And what I'd be interested to know more about, I don't think that and this is, like, the longest explanation, I don't think that the Golden State Warriors are some, like, rosy franchise that does no wrong. I think they tried to paint themselves like that when they drafted guys like Steph, Clay, and Dre in such a short window to create this giant of a franchise. And that, like, of course we attract Kevin Durant. Do we do everything right? What was the phrase? Like, we're light years ahead?
Yeah.
And, like, we're now seeing, like, cracks in the armor. I'd be interested to hear more about what they perceive as players as cracks in that armor, because as an isolated incident, this seems silly and childish. But if there's more, like, this was just the last straw, this is not the only straw, there's probably something there. And they didn't talk about anything else, so I don't know that. I guess if did I learn something? I don't know that I learned more than, like, oh, I might have been right that there are cracks in the Warriors' armor. They're really no light years ahead of anyone. They drafted an MVP and didn't have to pay him like an MVP until afterwards.
Third contract.
Yeah, and a salary cap spike.
Yeah,
they got the only MVP level player available in the free agency. I guess they were really good.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Did you think it was interesting that they were, like, friendly?
No, I mean, I think, like, in a lot of these situations, like, Shaq and Kobe were friendly when they were still playing, kind of after the trade in moments a couple years after. I think, like, LeBron is, like, very friendly with Steph now, and was, like, not really the best towards Steph for years. So, like, it's definitely not a surprise, and I think, like, it was definitely, like, interesting TV, but I felt done for a bunch of weird reasons. Like, I think it seems like everyone who was covering the fight, like, there are still, like, elements of what happened at that game between KD and Draymond that haven't been really published yet. Like, I think Jack McMullen or Ramona Shelburne said, like, they were at that game and, like, they never heard yelling like that. And, like, obviously, like, fights happen on teams, and, like, it all started because, like, everyone knew KD was leaving. Like, that was, like, a foregone conclusion. Like, I think the interview is not genuine, but it's very entertaining.
I was entertained, speaking of entertaining, by the jabs Durant threw to Draymond at his face. Right? Like, he was like, well, do you wish we'd stuck around and won more championships? He was like, if we'd been healthy, I was winning more championships right now. He was not going to let Draymond get away with stuff. I thought that was interesting.
KD. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I think that confidence has come post burner account. Like, once Durant got called out for the burner stuff, he's still the same guy. The same guy that was behind those burners. It's just not behind anything anymore.
Yeah, he has such good digs. Like, the CJ McCollum one of, like, bro, I did your podcast. like I did you a favor. It's like, it's still, like, an all-timer.
He's funny, and I wish he never did the burner thing, because then it would have always been, we know exactly what he said, right?
Yeah.
That's it for Hot Tea Cold Brew. We're gonna go into a segment, where'd it go, called The Long Two. Now, a mid-range, this is the midweek mid-range, and a mid-range jump shot is a long 2-pointer. It doesn't make sense to guys like we just talked about, like Daryl Morey, right? Why are you taking a jump shot from so far away and not getting the 3rd point by just stepping behind the 3-point line? But this is the midweek mid-range, and it's our shot. So, Chris, I'm going to ask for 2 takeaways from the Malice at the Palace documentary. For folks at home that don't know what we're talking about, Untold Stories, The Malice at the Palace is available on Netflix. It's about an hour long, and it's all kinds of footage that has never been released before and all kinds of interviews that have never been done before and talking about the Malice in the Palace. And outside of, I don't know how to describe it. I'm sure we'll touch on it some here. I just say Google it when you're done with the episode. It's hard to put into words what happened at the Malice Palace besides fans and players fought. Chris, what are your 2 takeaways?
One, always been a fan of Steven Jackson, and just watching him over an hour really makes me wish that he was a Nick at one point in his career. Like if it would have been so fun to root for him, and he was like the perfect Nick. I felt sad for that team because and like watching it because that team definitely had the ability to be a championship team. You kind of wish, like, being bipolar and having issues, like you feel for Artest, and I appreciated like his honesty in it. I know that's more than two takes, but but yeah, it was a great watch. And like, if you were not a basketball fan then or alive then, like I remember watching it in my dorm room in college and like just being like so entrenched, and like before Twitter, like you felt everyone talking about it. Like you felt like it being a thing. It was a wild scene that hopefully we'll never see again in our lifetime.
Yeah, the first takeaway, I mean, my wife and I sat down to watch it, and we both, I mean, she remembered the story, but I remember like watching SportsCenter on loop that night, watching it over and over again. And we both were like, holy, what a difference 15 years makes, right? Like just the entire dialogue, the conversation, the, non-doctor diagnoses, like all of those things happen wildly differently 15 years later in some senses. And what's funny is I don't know if they happen differently like 12 years later. It feels like the last few years we've really been much more on top of discussing mental health. I still weirdly think that like David Stern was going to David Stern and like go to dress codes and like get all the players the heck up out of there. Even if it was like Ron Artest is suspended so we can spend a year in therapy getting right. Like he was not going to play again for a while. And I don't mean that David Stern would have acted different. Some of the language on some of the networks that they mentioned, that was all just coded that garbage. Like there's no other way to say it. It was 100%. Just racist.
Like it definitely stood out in that way.
And I think some networks would still have that. I don't want to like say like we're at a better place and no one, like some places still use words like thug to describe black basketball players they don't like. And
100%.
So, like not as many maybe, but there certainly would still be some of that.
Yeah, like, and some people from it, like, Keith Olbermann not looking good. That is not holding up well there. I think like 2 things, like one just like minor and then like one bigger. Like the bigger thing, I think, looking back to the past few months, I think it kind of hopefully reignites the importance of everything that happened this postseason between fans and players. And I think, kind of going back to like I think it kind of ties into everything we kind of talked about, like whether it's the 2K rating, whether it's Durant and Draymond, players are able to voice themselves much more in a better way now. It felt like back then, even though it's not even 20 years, it felt kind of like the dumb, shut, and dribble term. I think now seeing what like the way these players engaged about whether it was like Trey being spit on or the Kyrie stuff, like I'm glad that they spoke up about these issues and that these fans were banned this postseason.
Even Russell Westbrook and the popcorn, right? Like weirdly similar.
There are too many to even remember this postseason.
Right.
Yeah.
The wild thing to me in looking at it all is like fans are still crazy. The entitlement of the Detroit fan that got socked by Jermaine O'Neal on the floor.
Oh yeah.
He still feels some kind of way about having not been in the wrong. Like you stepped to some like what you're not going to step to that dude outside this gym. Why are you stepping up to him in the gym? Like what are you doing?
Where are you doing? What are you doing going up to a 6'9" guy? Like you are like come on. Also like sorry.
Honestly, the other takeaway I had, and this is really a takeaway that I would steal from, I think it was a guy for The Ringer at the 10-year anniversary. I guess that actually might have been Grantland days. Anyway, talking about like, it's important to remember that was the last chance Reggie had and a very real chance that probably would have that was a championship team. Like it almost was the year before. They added champion in Steven Jackson. That was a championship level. They may not have won because of coin flips. I mean, Durant didn't win this year because of his shoes too big. Like that may have been a championship team that season that just blew up and dispersed because of this incident, right? Like directly related to all of this happening.
Yeah. It's wild. I think one thing that was like a little fun was seeing like Stephen A. Smith before like the on hardball, like in the early days of like his, I'm not sure if that was pre-ESPN when it was at the Inquirer or in between his ESPN stints, but like it was fun to start to see like that person start to emerge in that way.
Yeah, and frankly, all the reporters that looked 10 or 15 years younger talking about it.
Yeah, there's been some hard living at the bar.
I also liked how like candid Steven Jackson was. He was like, "I'm done talking about this. Like this is the last time I've ever," because it defined all of those players. Even Jermaine O'Neal, like,
he came off awesome
before the documentary? Did you know he fought in court and won, saying that the league had done him wrong?
I don't think I did.
I don't think I did either. And I'm a guy that like reads a lot about basketball. Like I didn't know that. I've said this like 4 or 5 times now. I live in Dallas. He runs a very prominent AAU organization in Dallas. He does a lot of things regarding youth basketball in Dallas. I always knew that he was more than that night. I did not know he got off saying the league did him wrong. I had no idea.
Great. It was awesome, and I'm glad that that documentary exists because it's definitely a real sliding doors moment in NBA history. And like I think, kind of going back to like our first topic of Rachel Nichols with like what is said behind closed doors, and like the Stern stuff doesn't look good, especially for a league that was built on like the backs of like African American players. Like these guys deserve like a time and like a big thing to kind of come out and say what they feel, and I'm glad that they got to give like their side of the story finally.
Yeah. And again, the code of racism speaks for itself. So if you haven't seen it, watch the doc. I hope that we don't have to like. I don't think I should have to explain how bluntly racist some of the conversation was around it.
Yeah.
So that's all. That's all you really have to say about it. I mean, that was just so obvious.
Yeah, it's the line. I forget who had it. It may have been Steven Jackson or Jermaine, but like when they made the point that like you see what happens in hockey all the time with fighting, but nobody uses the term thug. Like that really resonated to both like me and my girlfriend watching it. And it's like,
Jermaine says it, and he even pulls up. He references some famous. I'm not a hockey guy. He references some famous hockey fight where the guys win the stands.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, just nuts. As we start to wrap things up here, Wednesday Night Writes. Chris, what kinds of things are you writing or reading these days?
Oh man, I'm
listening to, I guess, frankly.
I'm currently writing an animated web series with this animator that has a good like Instagram following, so I'm excited to kind of get cracking into that. And then reading right now like just a bunch of scripts for friends for my writers group. Trying to give them some notes this weekend. What about you?
So I cranked through to get we'll talk about other stuff in a minute. My other show, Evan Sports, comes out on Mondays or Tuesday or start of the week. I got to talk to Miriam Fader, so I got to about her book Giannis, the improbable rise of an NBA MVP. So I cranked through that really fast. But I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'd recommend it to anyone. I think this is my second time plugging the book. I plugged it right before it started, saying go get it. I'd also say read it now.
It's an awesome book. Awesome. I mean, it's an awesome story, so I'm dying to read the book.
So many intricacies in it. The other thing I'll say is that it's listening to, not reading, but because it's a storytelling, I think it counts. I finished the 4-episode ESPN did a 4-episode podcast on the King of Crenshaw, a Nipsey Hussle podcast series, and tying him to sports. Great 4 episodes of listening. As far as obviously as a hip hop guy, I was aware of some of the stuff he's done for the community there in South Central LA and in the Crenshaw, Slauson area. But man, just a fascinating listen. A good show. Writing, I'm down to about 1, maybe 2 things a week because the last 2.5 weeks, we've been full-time football, full-time school, back as a full-time teacher. So things are slowing down. Once we get kind of in the rhythm of the things, they may pick back up though. I did a thing on the Draymond Green, Kevin Durant conversation last week. I got a Rockets roundup. I think it's going to be out tomorrow afternoon. And then I wanted to do something else and I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's where we're at there. If I ask you for a buzzer beater, do you have a take to get off?
Oh man.
For putting you on the spot a little bit.
It definitely is. So for me, everyone's focused on the Ben Simmons of it all, player movement wise, or Draymond or Beal. I'm really interested to see where Buddy Hield goes, because it feels like if you are a contender, you don't have to give up much for him except take money back. So it feels like he could really swing a team if put into the right position.
Ooh, coming in 3, 2, and 24. Good call. Buddy Hield is an interesting one. I was surprised he was not a Laker, and I'll kind of leave it at that. I was surprised he was not a Laker. Anyway, this is not that controversial. Anyway, 3, 2, 1. NBA Twitter is the best form of Twitter. The Rachel Nichols story explodes, and there's funny memes, funny GIFs, funny stories, all kinds of crazy, chaotic funniness. I know Twitter can be a really icky place at times, very icky, but NBA Twitter can be fantastic when one of these moments happens. It's a ton of fun, whether it's this or DeAndre Jordan or whatever. Love NBA Twitter.
100% agree.
Sometimes it's better to just watch, but it's a good time. It's a good time. Talk to us. Where can people find you and your stuff at, Chris? You are always working in sports, entertainment, or things. So where can people find you at?
Just on Twitter at the Dunniverse, and tweeting sports, jokes, and then occasionally about my former career at WWE, so professional wrestling stuff. So, just follow me. And what about you? Where can we follow you, Parker? I know it's in your handle. I should probably put mine in mine. But
I have it posted in StreamYard.
Yeah,
all will pop up whenever I. Anyway, So obviously my Twitter handle is on the screen if you're watching this at Ainsworth 512. PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter and Instagram. That's where I'll be sharing stuff like things I'm writing, things I'm, whether it's this show I'm a guest on, or F and Sports is my other show that comes out on the start of the week, I say, because sometimes it's Monday, sometimes it's Tuesday. I do want to plug the last F and Sports episode where I got to talk to old buddy Miran. Again, I said it earlier, but Miriam Fader, who wrote the Giannis biography. It's a really, really fun conversation about books. And I know that this is a sports podcast and it was a sports book, so it's somewhat it's agreeable, but it was a good chance to nerd out about a cool sports story, and that was really fun.
Yeah.
And so I want to shout that out. But that show is FN Sports. It comes out at the start of each week, either Monday or Tuesday. Again, you'll find all that though at Ainsworth 512. I share it all through there. I also share random tweets about sneakers, and I'm sure I'm going to take another L in the sneakers app tomorrow at some point. That is it for us. You can find this show on Twitter and Instagram. The Midweek Midrange is found at Midweek Midrange on both Twitter and Instagram. We're also on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe, download, do all those kind of things. You'll be able to check in when we're live that way. That's all we got. Chris, say goodbye. Thanks for pulling up, man.
Dude, it's always awesome. Thanks for having me on the pod. Till next week.
Till next week. Take care.